There was a widow who kept coming to him asking, "Give me justice in this case against my adversary." For a while he refused, but finally said to himself, "I don't fear God or respect people, but I will give this widow justice because she keeps bothering me. Otherwise there will be no end to her coming here and embarrassing me." The Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. Won't God provide justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? Will he be slow to help them? I tell you," he said, "I will give them justice quickly. But when the human one comes, will he find faithfulness on earth?" May God add his blessing to the reading of his word today.
Let us pray. Gracious and holy God, reveal once again to our minds, to our hearts, to all of our abilities, the ways in which we can be faithful, the ways in which we can come to know your purpose, your intent for our heart and for our lives. Grant to us the knowledge and the peace, and the willingness to submit into your hands your plan, our lives, and our future. Bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts. Might it be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Today, when we look at the scriptures, I'm going to take us in a different direction than we would normally go. The scriptures tell us Jesus, in his wonderful way, is saying, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected people. In the city there was a widow who kept coming to him saying, "Give me justice in this case against my adversary." One of the questions that we struggle with is judging, don't we? I have a friend who asks almost continuously, so when is it appropriate for us to judge and when is it appropriate for us not to judge? Because they find Christians to be very judgmental. And I thought to myself this week, when is it that I've abused my judgment? Or when is it that I've made a judgment that I would take back if I could? When I was working in the business world, I had a friend who we grew very close together. To the point he was trying to help me lose weight playing tennis and you name it. I was really just very fond of this guy, and his family were great people. The things in his career were not advancing as quickly as he hoped. And as I moved kind of into the management ranks, I knew that he was kind of, so to speak, in the queue for a promotion that would have kept him with the company. But he had a different calendar, a different plan. He didn't know that he was on that list. And in frustration, he told me in confidence one day that he decided to start looking for another job. And it wasn't long before, when he kind of cast that resume out there, that people were knocking on the door to get him. And in frustration, over the fact that I thought I was going to lose someone who I really respected highly, and thought not only will this might move him away, and it actually did. In fear of what the contributions are that he could make to the company, I told management that he was looking for a new career. That didn't hurt his career at all, but it did betray a trust the two of us had. He would within weeks, take a new job with a new company and leave and go to North Carolina. But I thought to myself, who was I when he said to me as a friend, "Hey, keep this in confidence, but here's what's going on." Who was I to really make the decision to betray that trust? And felt that I couldn't stay quiet, so I came clean to him on what I did and asked for his forgiveness. which, if you knew him, he extended to me. And I don't think held it against me, but it has been an issue that has bothered me forever. When I see people who sense that they know what the best plan is and implement that best plan, and it turns out to kind of fall apart in the end, I get frustrated over that. Here I turn into the very person that seems to frustrate me. So when is it that we should exercise right judgment or wrong judgment? And when is it, in some way, that it's reasonable for us to do so? So I thought this morning we would wrestle with that question. Judgment, after all, is making a decision. And in some cases, the decisions that I make impact only me. But sometimes, and in many cases, it has a rippling effect to my family and maybe even to my community. Think of Adam and Eve in that garden. Every day they could choose what fruit they ate, right? They could choose how they spent their time. There was no labor in that moment, right? They could tan on the beach or play in the trees in the woods, I don't know. The garden was kind of their paradise. They could sit in conversation with God, or they could take a nap. Each one of those choices was not offensive in any way. God asked them for one thing. Whatever you do, just leave this one tree alone. And every day, there was a choice to or not to go to that tree. And so, in many cases, the choices we make could be yes or no, or could be not to make a choice. And in some cases, our situations, the choice is made for us when we kind of hide from it. When we know Adam and Eve chose to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Interesting name, isn't it? Tree of knowledge. Who would want to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge? Except God said no. Then life changed for all of us. The possibility that we could ignore what God desires of us becomes a reality for all of us. And the consequences from it. I think one of the scriptures that scares me the most is in Matthew, when Jesus, in talking about judgment, says in Matthew 7, don't judge, so that you won't be judged. You'll receive the same judgment that you give. Whatever you deal out will be dealt to you. He goes on to say, why don't you see the splinter that's in your why do you see the splinter that's in your brother's and sister's eye, and don't notice the log in your own? I think the situation that we're talking about today, in judgment, and when I look in the Greek over this judge and the form of the verb or the form of the noun that's used, it really means kind of in the sense of a court case. That we judge and that the decision we make will have, in some cases, a dramatic impact on the life of someone else. They're not the day-to-day decisions that decide what I eat for breakfast. Yes, at times that has decision, right? It has impact on others. If I decide to go through McDonald's, then other people benefit from that, I hope, through employment and other things. And if I choose not to, I'm not punishing the people at McDonald's. It's just a decision we make. But there are other cases in which we have tremendous influence in the decisions that we make. I knew that as a manager. That I didn't output, my output was no longer the daily production of the people in my department. My output was the people who were doing that. How is it that I make their life better, equip them more, build the morale in the department, and allow them to fulfill their potential? But the decisions I made, I knew, had dramatic impacts. As a person in the purchasing department, I remember one day that I was making a proposal that we stop doing business with a particular company. And it seemed as though I was making this decision casually. So the vice president looked at me and said, I'll grant your proposal under one condition. I want you this week to schedule a meeting. At that supplier, and I want you to walk around and look at the faces of all the people who are working on our product line. Because your decision will influence them and their families. And if you can come back to me and say, okay, I still want to do this, then we will do it. I think he was going to agree to it anyways. But I think what he was telling me was, consider for a moment the power that you yield in your proposals. And not only the workers, the family, and the company, but the families that rely upon that income in the future. That left a kind of a heavy weight in my heart on the decisions that I was making. And any time a proposal came up to let an employee go, or even to hire one, I knew that we were making a heavy commitment in those situations, and the impact, both positively and negatively, would go on. We can't avoid those decisions in life, right? There is no way that we can avoid, even in our circle of influence, the decision and the power that we have in various roles in our lives. It still affects others. And I think what Jesus is saying is that we live in a community of interconnectedness. And the decisions that we make will have direct and, in many cases, permanent consequences on the lives of others. I'm thinking of my wife's role as a teacher and her decision every year to pick out that one student that tends to fall through the cracks. It's not the child that in some cases requires a lot of attention, either because of their demeanor or their voice. It's not the child that's school comes rather easy to them. It's the one that just kind of sits in the middle, that's kind of the quiet, middle of the road. And her decision to say, you know what, I'm going to make an impact on some of these kids' lives. And it's interesting to see the response of the adults years later over her decisions. One particular child she encouraged to go out for the play. Years later, the decision to give him a role in the middle school play led him into theater in college. And who knows? Maybe it's the next Tom Cruise, I don't know. Harrison Ford. Who knows? But just seeing the potential, and I thought back this week on my own career and my own life, and there was a particular teacher in my own school who looked at me and said, you could do far better than you're doing. And life had always communicated to me that I hadn't. But in her judgment, and with a little bit of encouragement, she taught me a system to do the one thing I hate most, and that's to write. Now, I'd rather get a root canal than write a paper. And I am, right now, ironically, in a correspondence with a gentleman at Chillicothe Correctional. And he writes right after he gets letters from me. And it's like a month, I'm sitting there looking at my laptop going, oh, brother, I haven't written it. Until the guilt level gets so high, then I finally output a new letter. He's not a Christian. He wrote the church just kind of randomly because he heard Christians were nice people. Wow, I don't hear that all the time. So I wrote it back, and we've been in correspondence and planning a visit here soon, meet face to face. Here's a question that he asked me. Not knowing anything about Christianity, and of course I know his circumstances. He's incarcerated for some decisions that he made, takes full responsibility and ownership for those decisions, but he asked me the question, do you always do the right thing? I gave him an answer, and in his last letter to me he said, Because I said, that's a complex subject. It's kind of something we should probably talk about. And in his reply, very sharply, he said to me, yeah, I noticed that you didn't really answer the question. And I'm really interested in your answer. Do you always do the right thing? As a person that's been exposed to Christians, what an interesting question. And I think for us, as a community of believers, we might even project on people that living this life at times is so easy. In some cases, we might turn around and say, you just need to do this. But we know the walk is not that easy, don't we? And we know at times we can do the right thing for wrong reasons. And we know at times we can do what's perceived as the wrong thing for right reasons. And how would I answer my friend in those situations? Do you always do the right thing? And then I think of the case of judgment. The judgment that we have. Remember Jesus' words. Remember the judge here. He has tremendous influence over the widow. Being placed in a place of judgment and power, remember Jesus says, to those that have been given much, much is expected. And to those who have been given little, little is expected. I think in many ways, we might apply judgment in that situation. To ones who have been placed in a seat that have tremendous influence on the quality of life of others, such as a judge, a king, a CEO, any political leader, religious leader, much is expected, right? What do we do in those situations? Do we, as my friend asks, do we always make the right decision and do the right thing? And I think when we're making decisions that we know directly impact the life of someone else, I think the right thing is asking the question, what's in their best interest? What's going to help them grow? Sometimes my image of what their best interest is, as in the beginning, as in my conversation about and my disclosure of Mike's intention to find a new job, I didn't make the right decision. But I think Mike extended me grace because he understood what my heart was at, and that I thought that he was in a pretty solid place, in a solid company with good benefits, et cetera, et cetera. Life would have its own challenges for Mike's family down the road, in which better health care provided by the company we work for would have been very beneficial. But that wasn't mine to determine. But in the situation where we say it is in the best interest of the other that this take place, even at times when it causes pain, is difficult, even for the decision maker. And sometimes we're placed in no-win situations where we have to decide A or B, and neither one is going to result in an extremely positive situation. But if our heart, if doing the right thing is doing what's in the best interest of the person I'm making a decision for, then I think God smiles. If God understands our heart and what we're trying to apply and are trying to do, then I think God is pleased. Where is our heart at? At times, does it feed our own selfish desires? Or is it really at times placed because this is a better option for you? In a pastoral role, it's no more easy than in other situations. My lead pastor in the church that I was a congregant in, he asked me to come in on Sunday mornings and to pray with him for half an hour, 45 minutes about the missions and ministry of the church. He had done this with 5 other gentlemen, and 6 days a week we prayer walked the church about its ministry. On one particular day, he came in and he sat down with me and he said, in our time we started with, are there any prayer requests for you that I can lift for you? Jim never seemed to have any, but on that day he said, pray for me. God knows what the prayer request is. Make sure that I know the right decision. About 3 weeks later, I came in one morning. Jim came up, put his hand on my shoulder and said, Joey, I'm not going to be with you this morning. I think God has a different purpose for your prayer time today. It'll be revealed when I leave. He went back to his office, and the deacon of our church came in, Lynn, sat down with me, and Jim had made the difficult decision to let her go. You see, Lynn was a very talented musician and led our music program. Lynn also, in answering the call to become an ordained deacon in the church, had to do some pastoral care work, this chaplaincy work in the hospital. And in doing so, found a whole new life, a whole new purpose. She was excited about this opportunity to help people in the most difficult parts of their lives. And she came to Jim one day and asked him if she could go part-time so that she could do chaplaincy. And Jim, seeing this woman in the role that she had done for years, just kind of muddling through, and in this role that she had new life, new passion, new hope, was praying about his response to her request. He gave her 4 months severance, and he told her he felt that she should do that full time. And he let her go. She spent 4 months flame-throwing him through that church and walked out. She found in those times a full-time job. And years later, when I came through the process, I signed up for a seminary class, as I always did each semester, 1 or 2. And in this particular class, it happened to be Lynn's last class when she was graduating with her degree. And since we hadn't seen each other in any classes then, I said, we should get together once a week. Just have lunch together and kind of check in with each other. And boy, I tell you what, when we sat down for lunch the first and then the second week, how's it going? She's a chaplain at Children's Hospital in the cancer unit. How is it with your soul, Lynn? She would talk, and her eyes would kind of light up as she talked about, her opportunity, the blessing of being in ministry in this way. She had a confidence and a boldness about her that I've never seen. She had been members longer than we were. We had known each other for the 14 years. We were there together. I remembered back to that morning in which she said to me, Jim doesn't want me anymore. He's rejecting me. And I saw a completely different person in front of me. And finally, after like the second or the third week, I said to her, Lynn, I just have to say something to you. I haven't seen you in all these years, and maybe those that see the change that has taken place in you week after week after week don't see it as boldly as I do, but man, you are a completely different person sitting in front of me today. And Jim described the fact that, or she described the fact that she knew in those conversations that Jim was trying to do what was in her best interest, even though she didn't see it. And I said, do you realize how much time you spent dogging the poor man in his church? And if people today, because she left the church too, moved on to a different church, if people today can see the woman that's sitting before me now, I just want to tell you, I remember who I saw you as years ago, and you are a completely different person. You have found the sweet spot of life. For you golfers, you understand what that means. For tennis players, if you hit the ball at a certain point on the racket, it gives it, or the club, it gives it extra trajectory. When you're living within your sweet spot, you are able to produce far more through your giftedness and through God's grace than you ever could. I said, oh, if those people back then that heard you for those 4 months could see you now. They know that this was the right decision, even though it was a tough decision. 2 weeks later, when I sat down with Jimmy after I had my moment with Lynn, I asked him, was this the situation you were asking me to pray about months ago? He said, yep. I said, it must not be easy. Both of them were beloved. By the way, he did this a month before the vote on the capital campaign to expand the building. And I just kind of in my own way said to him, your timing couldn't be worse. He said, it's not my timing, it's God's timing. Even though the situation was difficult, Jim saw something in Lynn that was far greater in her purpose in life and her passion. And she would have never stepped out of the boat and entered into full-time ministry. She's still there. She's still glowing about what God has enabled her to do. Life is good. We all make decisions each day. We all have direct influence over the lives of the people that we come in contact with. Is our heart turned and intended to do the right thing for them? And even in those difficult decisions, I believe God is smiling. Because he made a difficult decision for us, did he not? And modeled that through his own selflessness and self-sacrifice. Let us purify our hearts and say, Lord, what is it you want me to do for the best interest of others when I make those decisions? And let us boldly and confidently use the gifts of judgment for your glory and for your kingdom building. Amen. Let us pray as the praise band comes forward this morning to lead us in our time of worship. Gracious and holy God, we give you thanks that you have placed and bestowed upon us the gift of independent will, an opportunity for us in our own places and in our own ways to represent you in the lives of others. Might we always seek the right thing that is of you and that is for them, that we might walk away with the confidence that your plan, that your heart, that your life is still revealed through us. Let God's children say, amen. Let's stand and give